I'm Jill Santopolo, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Jill Santopolo.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Author Stories. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. There are handy links over in the sidebar on the right-hand side where you can subscribe to the show. You can find all of the archives in a handy little drop-down list, or there's a search bar where you can search for your favorite author and see if they have been on the show in these past more than 400 episodes. Thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to do this. And we've got some new sponsors coming on. Daniel Kinney, my favorite middle grade author, is just doing amazing things right now. He is publishing like a madman, but he's putting out excellent books. I buy his books for my nieces and nephews all the time. My kids are a little older now, but my nieces and nephews, I buy Daniel's books and put them in their hands. They are top shelf quality and really fun books. There's a link to Daniel's Amazon page in the show notes, and we're going to be highlighting more of his books as we go on this month. But go visit Daniel Kinney and buy his books for your favorite kids, and they will love it. Roy M. Griffiths has a new book, Bringing the Fire, The Lonesome George Chronicles, Book 2. Roy is really doing some amazing stuff in speculative fiction, and we're going to be highlighting more of those as the month goes on. But go pick up Roy's newest books. There's a link to it in the show notes. If you're a fan of alternative history or war and military thrillers, you're going to love these books. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, thanks to my buddies Nick and Jason from Galaxy's Edge for sponsoring the show. I would like to welcome back as a sponsor to the show Nick Breaker and his fantastic series Essence. Book 1 Septima and Book 2 Alta are out now. Nick is feverishly working to release Book 3 now. It's in editing, and you are going to absolutely love this series. Troy, with his irrational fears, is the least likely person to lead a war, but that doesn't mean he can escape his destiny. This fantastic science fiction action series is full of great characters, great character development, lots of action, and lots of weird science fiction goodness. If you love a great character-driven story with great science fiction, you are going to love this series. Essence. 2 books are out now. Book 1 Essence, Book 2 Alta, and the 3rd book will be here soon. Get into this series now. Everyone's talking about it. Thank you, Nick Breaker. Thanks for tuning in. As always, at the end of the show, we have an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. He enlisted for the money. He stayed for the girl. Gateway to the Galaxy, the new series everyone is talking about, beginning with Book 1, Into the Breach. Frank and Marine Space Corps 1 find themselves across the galaxy in a WWE smackdown with the legions of a boss-level villain. But the party's just getting started. He donned the mantle of a celestial knight to impress a girl, well, an empress. Now destiny's calling in a debt. A lightning-paced military fantasy full of outlandish comedy and impossible situations that will have you hailing for these Marines from the get-go. For fans of Green Lantern and the Stargate universe. Listen to what some readers are saying. This is good stuff. Thanks for the new obsession. I recommend and can't wait for the next book. And the visual pictures and action are amazing. They're getting the band back together, and this time it's serious nonsense. Pick up the Gateway to the Galaxy series by Jonathan Yanez and J.R. Castle. Available now on Amazon.com. There's a link to it in the show notes. Gateway to the Galaxy. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Jill Santopolo on the show with me today. Jill's book, The Light We Lost, is an amazing book that you guys are really going to love. It is showing up on all sorts of lists this summer and just really doing amazing things. So I'm really excited to have Jill with me today. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to have you. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh my gosh. So this is a little crazy, but
those are the best stories.
So I wrote my very first book when I was 3. And I know that I was 3 because my mother is an elementary school teacher, and she had access to a laminating machine when I was growing up, and laminated all of the stories that I wrote and wrote my age on the construction paper for each of them. So I have my collection of juvenilia, toddler books. I don't know what you want to call them. So the first book I wrote when I was 3, and it was about Stacy the cat, who turned people into mats if they pet her magically. Not really the best. But I have it, and that was the first time that I think I told my mom I wanted to write stories. And then I realized, I think kind of in early elementary school, like first, second grade, when authors came to our school, that this was actually a job that people could have. You know, that like somebody actually wrote all these books. And I was like, well, if somebody has to do this job, I could be a person who does this job. I already write stories. And I wrote a mystery for Elizabeth Levy, who is an author, a children's book author who came to my school when I was in first grade. I don't have that one because I gave it to her. But I do have her thank you note for my story, which my mother laminated. So, yeah, so I think, you know, by early elementary school, I was pretty sure that this was the job that I wanted. And then in high school, when you had to write those essays, you know, to get into college or whatever, one of the essays that I wrote was something like write page 368 of your autobiography or something was the essay prompt. And my essay was about me signing books that I had written for readers.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so this has kind of been a thing I wanted to do basically my whole life.
Well, you know, so many people confuse storytelling and writing with publishing and selling books. And that is absolutely something that almost every writer or storyteller I've ever met aspired to. But they are not necessarily the same thing. I mean, you knew at 3 years old you were a writer, you were a storyteller. It's just who you were. And then, you know, the natural career path for someone who has that gift is to write books for other people. But I truly believe that you're born that way, and it's a gift that will express itself one way or another, whether you choose that as a career path or not.
Yeah, I think it's totally true. I mean, the novel I wrote, The Light We Lost, it wasn't a book that I was writing for publication. I was writing vignettes for myself as a sort of way to get through a breakup, because that's how I process the world. I process the world through story, and I was writing stories for me, and then it turned into a novel for other people. But I think you're totally right. I mean, I would write if nobody read it except for my own self.
Yeah. And I hear that so often that, you know, I would be doing this if you know, one of the greatest examples that I love so much is Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy author that was on a year or so ago. And he said that he wrote something like 13 novels before anything ever got published. And he said, the truth is, if I was never published, you know, my kids would inherit, you know, a room in my house that was just stacked to the ceiling with books, because I was going to be writing those books, whether anyone bought them or not. You know, it's just who I am. And, yeah, I completely get that. And I think a lot of people are nodding their head like, yes, that's what I would do too. I want to get to The Light We Lost in just a minute, and you actually answered one of my questions already, but I'm going to save that.
Sorry.
No, that's great. So when you went to college, did you pursue an education and career path that would put you in publishing?
So I was an English literature major. But I went to college at Columbia University, where we had classes 4 days a week, and on Fridays they basically said, go out into New York City and find yourself an internship or a job or something, to go do something. And I was lucky enough to find myself an internship in publishing. So I got to see, that side of the process, and I really, really enjoyed it. So when I graduated, I actually landed on as an editorial assistant, and I still am working on the editorial side of publishing as well as the writing side of publishing.
So it didn't scare you away when you saw how the sausage is made. I think some people, some people don't want to know that there's real work behind, making books, and it just wants to be magic and ethereal and, all this kind of stuff. But it's an actual job, isn't it?
Yeah. And, I actually really liked it because there's, the editor who basically works with the writer and says, okay, I recognize your vision. Let's make this book the very best version of this book that we can make it. And I think for me then and now especially too, the idea that there is someone who's in this with me to make it as good as it can be, I love it. The Light We Lost would not have been the book that it is without my editor's input. I think she helped me so much in making this book, the best version of itself it could be.
Right. Oh man, I want to get, there's so many questions I have about it. But before we do, you mentioned Columbia University. A pretty life-changing event happened while you were at Columbia, didn't it?
Yes. I mean, you're talking about for the world, right?
Yes, for the world. You were there on September 11th, 2001, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
What was that experience like with you being kind of front and center?
I mean, I think I write about it in The Light We Lost, and the experiences that Lucy and Gabe have in the book were drawn from experiences that my friends and I had that day. And what I think was kind of so incredible about it is I was in class. It was, before 9 o'clock in the morning, I was in class and learning about Shakespeare with a few hundred other people. And we had no idea what had happened. And we left class and the world had changed. And I think it was the first time for me and for a lot of my friends that we realized that this kind of thing can happen. Like a tragic, horrible event can happen and the world can shift on its axis. And that's really what it felt like. And I think a lot of us, we were 21, 22, 20, however old we were, about to go out into the world, kind of realized, every moment counts and everything you do counts. And you could wake up tomorrow and a plane could hit your office building and that could be that, so whatever you do in your time on Earth, make sure it counts. And, I had friends who decided that day they were going to be doctors or journalists or, lawyers fighting for people's rights or writers or, go into politics. I think it was a really impactful day, in so many ways, but I think it made a lot of us realize at that point, like, you're not guaranteed tomorrow, so do what you can today.
Right. And those scenes in the book that you reference are so visceral, and you connect really deeply on an emotional level with the characters going through that obviously was written out of personal experience? Was it being 10, 15 years past that event when you went to write those scenes? Did it all come back so close and real for you?
Yeah, I think the emotion was always there. I mean, I did call a few friends from college to say, like, am I remembering the sequence of events correctly? Am I remembering what it smelled like? Am I remembering what it looked like? Am I remembering these conversations, or am I moving things around in my mind? And, a lot of my friends at the time were like, no, yeah, that's this detail, that's that detail. I remember that too. I remember this too. And I worked on the Columbia Daily Spectator, and I pulled up our old, our edition from that day, to just sort of read through how we'd reported on it and what students had been quoted as saying and thinking.
The Light We Lost is an amazing book on a lot of different levels. It is definitely an adult book, but you mostly have been working on fiction for younger people. What is your day-to-day editorial duties? What kinds of writers do you work with? What kinds of stories do you work with? And what was it like transitioning to writing this book, which is maybe out of what you have, are comfortable with doing day in and day out?
So day in and day out, I am an associate publisher for the Young Readers division of Penguin Random House.
Okay.
The Penguin Young Readers group. And I work on picture books, chapter books, young adult novels, basically books for humans from birth to 18 years oldish, and then the adults who also really enjoy young adult literature. And that's sort of what I had been writing as well. I've got, I think it's 14 books for younger readers out there that I've written before I wrote The Light We Lost. And I had never really assumed or thought I would write anything outside of that young reader realm. I love that world. I love writing for kids. I love doing school visits and talking to kids about writing and helping them find their voices and their stories. And, it's something that I'd thought about doing for a long time. But like I said before, I'd gone through this horrible breakup and didn't really know how to function in the world. And because I'm a writer, I write, so I was writing about it. And people ask if The Light We Lost is autobiographical, and I say it's emotionally autobiographical, but not plot point by plot point autobiographical.
I love that, actually. I think a lot of people are going like, yes, I know exactly what that means. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started writing these vignettes as a way to kind of figure out my feelings about things, about this relationship, about life, about whatever. And I'd written about 30 pages, and I had drinks with a friend of mine who's a writer, and she asked me how I was doing, and I told her, I'm kind of writing this thing, and I don't really know what it is, but I'm enjoying it. And she said, well, why don't you send it to me? So I sent her the 30 pages, and she wrote back to me, and she said, I think you're writing a novel for grown-ups. And I was like, for grown-ups? No way! And then I kept going, and I did write a novel for grown-ups. And I think that there are things that I've learned about writing and editing for young readers that I was able to sort of apply to writing for a different age group. But also, it was really interesting to me that I could use all of the experiences of my life and all of the kinds of things I think about in this book, because when you're writing about a 10-year-old, your reference points sort of end around 10.
Right.
So this was a really almost freeing writing experience because I didn't have to stop there.
What came first for you? You said you were writing this series of vignettes. Did the characters come to you first? Did their situation come to you first? How did the vignettes kind of evolve for you?
I think they kind of almost came at once, that there was a woman. I knew there was a woman going through a breakup, and then I sort of was figuring out from there who she was, who he was, why they'd broken up, what had happened, kind of all of that. And I don't necessarily think that the way this book starts is how the vignettes had started. Like, they're kind of all smushed around in here once I realized that I needed an actual story arc, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that is exactly what my next question was going to be, is when you discovered that this was a book, how did your process change? I would imagine that having written as much as you have for younger audiences, you have a very particular writing style and a maybe a planning style, and you fall into habits and things like that you know are successful for you, and that you can when you commit to a project, you know how to get to the end of it. Well, you've got this project that just kind of came out of nowhere, out of your emotional experience and your journey. And then when you realize that there, is there's an arc here that I need to get with and find out where these things I've discovered plug in and all that. How did that change? And how was this different from your other projects that you've done?
So, with the children's books that I've written, I very much outlined them in a real serious way, mostly because 10 of the books that I've written are a chapter book series called The Sparkle Spa, about two entrepreneurial elementary school age girls who start a sparkly nail salon for their friends and donate all the money they make to charities in their neighborhood.
Like you do.
Like you do.
Yeah.
And for those books, it was between 8 and 10 chapters, and they're pretty formulaic in the sense that, like, something, starts the book off and then something bigger happens, and, I have 8 to 10 chapters to make an entire story arc and find resolution at the end, So with those, I would do a chapter by chapter outline of the main plot points that I had to hit in each chapter, and then kind of work through the emotional arc as well. But for this one, I just kind of started moving forward a bit more, and then realized, all right, I need to know where this is going. I need to know at least the middle and the end, because I don't think I can do a chapter by chapter outline for whatever this is, 77 chapters. That just felt like it would take forever and wouldn't be the most kind of satisfying way to do this, because then it would just kind of be sitting there filling in the chapters for 77 chapters. And I wasn't really sure where everything was going either. I think because of the way it sort of started. But I knew I needed to know what happened at the end so that I could at least arc something toward the end. And so I have a writing group of a bunch of friends. We've been meeting for years and sharing our stories with each other and giving feedback. And I gave them, I think, maybe 150 pages. And I didn't know it. And that was when I was like, I need to know what this end is, because I don't know how to arc this book anymore. I've gotten started, but I don't know where it's going. And they were really helpful. I told them sort of where I thought the end was going, and they were like, no, that's not really going to be satisfying. That's not really going to work. So we talked through it and kind of got to a place. But even once I knew where it was ending, the end of this book didn't really crystallize until very close to it was going into production. Because I had written further past where this book ends now. I'd stopped earlier. I couldn't figure out exactly the moment where I wanted the story to be over.
So I guess you. Well, hello, my dog just opened the office door and came in.
Hey, Doc.
Hello, Peaches. So you didn't necessarily know the ending. Was this, or maybe not? You didn't know exactly what the resolution was going to be.
Yeah, I knew how it was going to end after that meeting with my friends, my writer friends. I sort of knew what I was writing toward, but I didn't know kind of what the button on the end was going to be. You know, how I was going to like put it all together. And you know, the book ends with a letter, and that letter didn't come together until very close to the end of the writing process, of the 4-year-long writing process.
Wow! So we've got these 3 characters, and these 3 characters are really what the book or who the book are revolving around. We've got Lucy, we've got Gabe, and then Darren.
Mm-hmm.
What are these characters? First, just kind of give us a setup for the book, and how did these characters? What did these characters mean to you?
So the setup for the book is basically that Lucy and Gabe meet in college and kind of fall hard for each other, and then through various circumstances, they kind of come in and out of each other's lives over the next 13 years. And while Gabe is out of Lucy's life, Darren kind of sneaks right in. And then it becomes a bit more complicated, sort of what Lucy's relationship toward Gabe can be when she has a relationship with Darren as well. So, you know, I think there was a lot I wanted to say in the story about kind of the power of a first love, and the first time that as an adult you feel seen by someone else and you feel loved because of who you are, not in spite of who you are, and what that means to you and what that means for the rest of your life, and how it kind of shapes decisions you make and relationships with other people later on. So I think that for Lucy, you know, she sees things through the lens of her love for Gabe. And I also kind of wanted the debate to be there about what, you know, that not everyone is looking for the same thing in a relationship or in love. And I think there's a section where Lucy and her best friend are talking about different kinds of love. And what kind of love do you want? Do you want the kind that makes you crazy, or do you want the kind that feels stable and solid, or, you know, do you want a one-night stand, or, you know, what are you looking for? And I think that was sort of something I'd been thinking a lot about too, kind of that there are different kinds of love in the world, and they're not better or worse. They are just different. And I wanted Lucy to kind of figure out what it was that she wanted in her life.
Yeah.
If any of that made any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's also a really powerful undercurrent in this book that I thought was really I don't even have a good word for it. It just really struck me hard that there's this thing about following your dreams, and people tell you all the time, you know, follow your dreams, follow your passion, do everything that you want to do. And the reality of that is, when you do that, there are sacrifices that come with following your dream, and certain people will not be able to go with you when you follow your dream, and the choices that you make to fulfill your passions will have effects on others, and you really lay that out bare And that really struck me. Was that something you were conscious of going in?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I think that in when I was writing this and sort of trying to figure out life as well as I could at that moment, I was sort of looking at life as a series of choices, and that each of us makes a choice of what's more important at that moment in time. And is it more important to you to follow this career path or this dream, or is it more important to you to have this family or this relationship or, a feeling of whatever else, and that when people tell you to follow your dream, when you want to follow your dream, it's a perfectly valid choice, but it's a choice, and it means that there are other things that you're not choosing. That if one thing is the most important, two things can't be the most important. It's just not possible. One has to be second.
Right. Yeah, that's it really plays out viscerally in this book, and I'm glad you were so honest about that, because it really resonated with me.
I'm glad.
You work as an editor in your day job, and you talked about your relationship with your editor on this book. Does working with your editor as a writer make you more empathetic as an editor? Does that affect your relationship with your writers? Is that a symbiotic thing?
Yeah, and I think I've been working with different editors as a writer, for a while. I think my first book came out about 10 years ago. So I've had different editors on my own work, and I think that what I try to do is and I think all of my editors have done this, and it's lovely, is just treat the writers that I edit as partners. And we're in this together to make this book great. We're in this together because we both want this book to be a success. And, that's kind of the guiding principle, and to sort of make sure that we both always remember that. I'm not giving notes or making comments on things as an editor because, I want to see the writer jump through hoops or whatever. I understand that my editors aren't doing that either.
Yeah.
That, I need them to see what I can't see, and I hope that I can be that for the the authors that I edit.
Right. The book has gotten lots of attention from from landing on the New York Times bestseller list to a number of book clubs and some endorsements from some powerful voices in the book world. Did that surprise you, that this story that began so personal for you resonated with so many people? And do you ever kind of get that out of body experience when people are talking about the book? Like, no, this was a personal thing for me. This couldn't be, so all these people can't like this book. It's kind of bizarre when people start talking about things you make.
Oh, it's absolutely true. I found it shocking, and I still find it shocking, honestly. I was saying to somebody the other day that, I just had figured, like, oh, it's so nice that somebody is interested in publishing this story that I wrote for myself, and maybe a few people will read it and they might like it too, and like that will be so lovely that happened. And then I think it was when foreign publishers started coming on board that I was like, oh, this is going to be this might be a thing. Like, this is going to be bigger than I thought it was going to be, I think. And, I've been getting, emails and Twitter direct messages and Facebook messages and Twitter direct messages from people literally from, all across the world who have read my book and want to tell me about their reaction to it or about their first love or about a way that they related to Lucy or to Gabe or to Darren at various points in their lives and how they connected with the story. And I mean, I'm just floored every single time that this really intimate story that, started so personally has resonated with so many people in so many places. But then I guess it kind of makes me realize that love and loss are really universal, and that no matter where we're from or how we grew up or what language we speak, it's a human experience to love someone, to lose someone, and that it's kind of nice that there's something that we can connect on no matter who we are or where we are.
It's a great feeling when stories become bigger than the teller, or when things just take a life of their own. It's one of those powerful things about stories that we started talking about in the first part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Jill, what are you working on now? I see that you've got a book coming out at the beginning of next year. Was this a natural follow-up for the book that's out now?
I guess in a sense it might have been. It's also a story about love and loss, but it's called More Than Words, and it's a story about a woman whose father passes away, and she discovers secrets about him after he's died that she didn't know when he was alive. And it kind of changes her perspective on her childhood and on him and on her parents' marriage and on sort of the way she interacts with the world and the way she interacts with other men in her life. And, this first book, The Light We Lost, kind of came out of an emotionally autobiographical breakup place. And More Than Words actually also came out of an emotionally autobiographical place in that I lost my father 3 years ago, and he's very much not the father in this book, and I did not find out secrets about him after he passed away, but sort of dealing with grief after losing a parent and sort of figuring out a place in the world when this kind of beloved North Star in your life isn't there anymore, is kind of what I was exploring in this book, in the second book. So I think it in a sense, it's a follow-up, though it's not really connected. Though I did actually, for very close readers, there are two minor characters in More Than Words who are characters in The Light We Lost. So these all my characters live in the same world.
Nice.
Yeah, I had fun with that.
I like that. Well, I can't wait to read it. And when it comes out, will you please come back on the show and talk about it?
I would absolutely love that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Jill, if people are just learning about you and want to know more about you and follow along with the news and events and all of that good stuff, where can they find you online?
Well, I'm on. I have a website which is jillsantopolo.com, but I'm not very great at updating it. But what I do update all the time is my author Facebook page and my Instagram feed. So I think my Facebook page is Jill Santopolo Author, and my Instagram feed is at Jill Santopolo. And then I'm also on Twitter at Jill Santopolo, though I am not quite as good at remembering to post on Twitter as I am at Instagram and Facebook. I really like Instagram.
Instagram's just too fun.
It's my favorite one.
Yeah, absolutely. Jill, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. We're going to send everybody to go pick up their copy of the book, The Light We Lost, and thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Natalie, it's Artie. Listen, I'm going to be late for dinner. I ran out of gas on... He climbed out of the car and peered at the sign. On Sleepy Hollow Road. There's nothing but trees, and I have to find a gas station. Save me a drumstick. He hung up his cell and stuck it in his pocket, zipping his jacket. He was going to have to walk and pray somebody picked him up. A sliver of crescent moon hung above, surrounded by clouds, like a grinning drunk asleep in a puddle. Artie walked, using his tablet as a flashlight, eyes on the gravel ahead. He crossed over a dark ravine. The trunks and overhanging branches were matted thick with wild grapevines and threw a cavernous gloom over the road. A figure stood at a crossroads ahead. It looked pale and wan and blue. A woman? He had an impression of fragility and age, and thought of his warty old landlady. But his landlady would not be standing at a crossroads in the dark. "Excuse me?" Artie said, surprised by the fear in his own voice. "Do you know where I can find a gas station? I'm empty." "Then let me fill you," the figure whispered. It rushed at him. It entered him. He dropped the tablet, fell to his knees, and lost his body to another driver. When Artie woke again, he was dangling in midair. The woods were pitch black. The only lights were fireflies. Fireflies everywhere, like dancing stars. He struggled and cried out, his yellow sneakers trying to find the ground. "Shh," said a voice. "It will all be over soon." Panic rose. He felt invisible hands on his legs, on his arms, invisible fingers around his neck, reaching up the back of his shirt. He heard the sound of water running below, high and agitated, as if through a stony brook. The crescent moon swung out of the sky, falling into the water. Blood rushed into his cheeks. He realized he had been flipped upside down. He yelled and groped, flecking his own face with spit, helpless to drive away whatever was attacking him. He felt a sharp pain between his shoulder blades, and air flew out of his lungs. A spray of blood hit his cheeks, hot and clinging. His hands found a sharp branch protruding from his body. It had speared him through his back and out through his chest. He tried to say help, but had no air to form the word. Blood poured up his body. No, it poured down. It only felt as if it were rising, climbing his neck, covering his face, gathering in his scalp. He reached for the ribbon of blood that fell from his crown into the trickle of moonlight below. The ribbon slipped through his fingers. It thinned, choked, became a tiny rivulet. His tanks were empty. Not even fumes. His engine began to sputter. The flow became a drip. A maddening drip like the drip, drip, drip of his kitchen faucet. The drip his landlady hadn't fixed. The drip that kept him up at night. This drip would not be keeping him up. He would sleep very well this night. Very well indeed. The fireflies slipped into shadow. A figure appeared, blue as gaslight, bony and toothless. A crone from a fairy tale. "Thank you, my friends," she whispered. "I am thankful for this good harvest." She neared, scrutinized him with manic intensity, and turned away, muttering to herself in a sing-song rhythm as she, too, vanished into the trees. "A man may toil from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done,"